My name is Evan Carter. I'm 31 years old, and last Thanksgiving my mother called me a burden in front of everyone. My brother laughed and said, "At least I make this family proud." I didn't yell. I just set my fork down, stood up, and walked out into the freezing night. Behind me, the doorbell camera blinked red, recording every word. The next morning a bank called about a mortgage I'd never applied for under my name. They thought they'd humiliated me. But what they didn't know was, before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by your own family. Because this story isn't just about money or pride, it's about what happens when the quiet one finally stops being the family's safety net and turns silence into the sharpest weapon of all. I grew up in a house where noise meant approval. If you were loud, confident, shining, Mom noticed. If you were quiet, helpful, steady, she called it, bare minimum. Thanksgiving wasn't the first time I'd been invisible. It was just the first time the silence burned. When I was 9, Brandon was already the golden boy. He had this perfect blonde hair that Mom said looked like sunlight. She'd ruffle it in front of relatives while I stood beside her, holding the serving tray. "Evan's my little helper," she'd say, never looking at me long enough to realize I wasn't smiling. The sound of the dishwasher always reminds me of her voice back then, sharp, fast, layered over the clatter of plates. "Don't touch that pan, Evan, you'll scratch it. Be careful, honey. You're not like your brother. He's good with his hands." When you hear something enough times, you start believing it. By middle school, Brandon had trophies covering his dresser. Mom polished them every Sunday like they were relics from a sacred temple. She framed his football photos, his certificates, his smirk. My achievements, science fair ribbons, debate medals were stacked in a shoebox under my bed. I never complained. At 13, I'd already learned the safest way to survive in that house was to stay useful and quiet. Dad wasn't cruel. He just wasn't there. Even when he was home, a heavy man with thinning hair and the smell of whiskey lingering in his breath. He'd mutter a good job without lifting his eyes from the TV. When I turned 16, he handed me a rusted toolbox. "You'll need this someday," he said. It was the closest thing to fatherly advice I ever got. That same year, Brandon crashed Mom's SUV into a lamppost. The insurance covered most of it, but the deductible was steep. Mom cried in the kitchen, saying she didn't know how they'd manage the bills. I remember standing there with my first paycheck from a grocery store job, folded in half inside my pocket. I offered it before thinking. "Here," I said quietly. "It's not much, but maybe it helps." Mom hugged me, fast, distracted. "You're such a sweet boy," she said. "Brandon's lucky to have a brother like you." Brandon never said thank you. He just asked if he could borrow my car next week. When I was 18, I left for college in the same town, couldn't afford to go far. I was the first in our family to actually graduate. I majored in logistics and data analysis, the kind of job no one brags about but everyone needs. I thought earning a degree would change how they saw me. It didn't. After graduation, I found out why my credit score was lower than it should have been. The power company called, asking about unpaid bills under my social security number. I didn't even have an account with them. Turns out, Mom had opened one when I was still in high school. "Just for convenience," she said later, laughing it off. "We were busy, and your name was easy." It took me 2 years to fix it. I never told anyone at work. Dad had his first heart scare 5 years later. Brandon was in Miami, networking. I drove Dad to every appointment, filled his prescriptions, set up their online billing because Mom didn't trust the internet. When the hospital bills started stacking, I stepped in again. The first mortgage payment I made for them felt temporary. It was supposed to be a one-time favor just until they got back on their feet. But one time became every month. Mom would text, "Thank you, sweetheart. We'll pay you back soon." Soon never came. Brandon's life looked perfect online. He posted photos from rooftops and yachts with captions like "Grind never stops." Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks, doing freelance data audits at night to keep my own lights on and theirs too. I didn't resent them then. Not yet. I told myself it was just family loyalty. But loyalty starts to rot when it's one-sided. Every holiday carried the same pattern. I'd arrive early, roll up my sleeves, start cooking. Brandon would stroll in late with expensive wine and some new girl. With impossible cheekbones, Mom would beam like a stage light. "Look at him. So driven. So mature." I'd be scraping burnt potatoes off a pan while she said it. Christmas 3 years ago stands out like a scar. It was snowing hard, the kind of night where the world goes quiet, except for the sound of shovels and car tires on ice. We sat around the tree after dinner. Brandon handed out gifts, perfume for Mom, a new smartwatch for Dad. Mom clapped like a kid. You shouldn't have, honey. When it was my turn, she handed me a single envelope. Inside was a $25 restaurant gift card. Thought you could treat yourself? You never go out, she said brightly. Brandon laughed. Yeah, maybe find a date, bro. I forced a smile. That was the night I realized you could love people who didn't know how to love you back, and it wouldn't save you. By my late 20s, I'd stopped trying to compete. I stayed behind the curtain, fixing, paying, patching leaks no one else noticed. If the internet bill was late, I handled it. If the water heater broke, I hired the repairman. Mom would post photos captioned, "Blessed family life, so grateful." And I'd scroll past, wondering if anyone knew what gratitude actually looked like. The funny thing about being dependable is that people start to think you owe them your reliability. I learned to stop expecting apologies. But I never stopped hoping for acknowledgement. Just once, I wanted Mom to look at me and say, "We couldn't have done this without you." That moment never came. And by the time Thanksgiving rolled around again, the one that started it all, I'd already begun to sense that something was breaking, quietly, beneath the surface. At work, I'd been offered a lateral move to Seattle. More money, more independence. I told no one yet. I just wanted to see how it felt to imagine leaving. I didn't know it back then, but that thought, just a whisper of escape, would become the thread that pulled everything apart. The last year before everything collapsed felt like living in a fog that kept getting thicker. I'd wake up, make coffee, check my parents' mortgage balance before my own. My phone buzzed every morning with reminders, utilities, prescriptions, groceries. My name was on half their bills, and yet, in their house, I was a ghost with a wallet. Sometimes I'd call Mom just to hear if Dad was okay. She'd answer in that bright, distracted tone. "Oh, honey, everything's fine. Brandon's coming over later. He got promoted. Isn't that great?" She never asked how my work was going. At the time, I worked in a logistics firm, rows of cubicles under fluorescent lights, spreadsheets stacked like invisible walls. I liked order, predictability. Numbers made sense. People didn't. I'd eat lunch alone, scanning invoices while others joked about fantasy football. I didn't mind. It was quieter that way. But one night, around 10 p.m., my coworker Mara stopped by my desk. "You okay, Evan? You've been staring at that screen for an hour." I blinked. "Yeah, just thinking about something." She smiled. "You always are." I didn't know what to say. She walked away before I could answer. I realized then that silence had become my armor and my cage. That summer, Dad's health dipped again. Hospital visits, medication refills, co-pays. Brandon sent flowers from across the country. I sent another mortgage payment. When Dad came home, I fixed the porch steps that had rotted through. The smell of sawdust mixed with old coffee drifting from the kitchen. Mom stood in the doorway. "You don't have to do that," she said flatly. But she didn't stop me either. She just added, "Brandon's been thinking about starting his own business. He has great instincts. You should talk to him about helping. He could use your brain for the boring stuff." I hammered the nail harder than I needed to. "My plate's full, Mom." She clicked her tongue, disappointed. "You always say that." By fall, Brandon was back home temporarily. He said he'd quit his corporate job to be his own boss. I knew the truth. He'd been forced out for misusing company funds. He brought his girlfriend, Danica, with him. She looked 25, all confidence and lipstick, calling everyone babe. Mom adored her. So elegant. She whispered once as Danica scrolled through her phone at dinner. I was invisible again. One night, while I was washing dishes, I overheard Brandon in the next room. "I'm telling you, babe, this next idea is gonna blow up, consulting for logistics startups. Easy money." Danica hummed. "Do you even have funding?" Brandon laughed. "Evan will help. He always does." The plate almost slipped from my hands. I waited for Danica to ask how he knew that. She didn't. Thanksgiving came too fast that year. The air turned brittle. Frost laced the windows. I remember the way the light hit the counter, sharp, white, unforgiving. Mom handed me a potato masher without looking up. "You know what to do." I did. I always did. When Brandon arrived an hour later, he kissed her cheek and handed over a bottle of wine like he was royalty returning from war. Dinner was the usual performance Elaine's one-woman show about her successful son, her loyal husband, her quiet helper. Then she said it. That line, "You know, Evan, you've always acted like you're doing us some huge favor. You're not. You're just a burden." It hit like cold water in my lungs. Brandon chuckled. At least I make this family proud. The table went silent except for the slow clink of my fork. And then I stood, walked out, and let the front door close behind me. That night, I drove without direction. The streets were empty, a thin fog floating over the asphalt. My reflection in the windshield looked like someone else, someone tired of being useful. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow. The next morning, Mom sent a text. "Hope you're done sulking. Don't forget the mortgage draft on Monday." No apology, just expectation. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then I turned off autopay. The first thing I'd ever done purely for myself was a quiet rebellion. But rebellion has an echo. A week later, Dad called. His voice was stiff, controlled. "Evan, the bank says the mortgage hasn't been paid." "I know." Silence crackled over the line. "Why not?" "Ask your favorite." Click. 2 days later, another message from Mom. "We need you to sort this before it ruins our credit. Don't be childish." That word childish hit harder than burden. It was the moment I understood something brutal. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved the convenience of me. December came with gossip. My cousin Maya called one night, voice low. "Aunt Elaine's been telling people you're having a breakdown. Says you're unstable." I felt the air leave my lungs. "She said that?" "Yeah. I don't believe her, obviously. But she's saying you cut them off because you're not well." I laughed short, bitter. "Right. Mental illness is easier than accountability." "Evan," she said gently, "you might want to watch your back. Brandon's acting weird lately." She hesitated before adding, "I think they're planning something about the house." I didn't understand what she meant then. That weekend, I drove to the cabin by Pine Lake, the one Grandpa Harlan left me. It was small, creaky, surrounded by tall pines that moaned when the wind hit. Inside smelled of dust and cedar. I hadn't been there in years. I lit the old fireplace, sat with coffee, and for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't hurt. While cleaning, I found an old metal box under the bed. Inside were receipts, a small photo of Grandpa fishing, and a folded envelope addressed to my mom never mailed. The letter read, "Elaine, don't repeat my mistakes. Don't mistake quiet for weakness. The people who hold you up eventually collapse if you forget they're human." Tucked beneath it was an old electric company invoice from 15 years ago under my name, signed by her. My stomach dropped. That was the proof Maya had hinted at. The pattern had started long before I noticed. I sat there in the orange glow of the fire, realizing I wasn't crazy, or petty, or ungrateful. I was used. When I drove back Sunday night, my mind was clear in a way that felt dangerous. I opened my laptop and went through years of bank statements, every mortgage payment, every transfer to their accounts, every Venmo for groceries and repairs. I created a folder titled Evidence. I didn't know it yet, but I was building the foundation for everything that came next. By January, I'd stopped answering calls. I changed passwords, locked my credit, froze my cards. Mom's posts shifted from passive-aggressive to poetic. Sometimes family drifts apart when hearts grow cold. Underneath, Brandon commented, "Pray for him." They painted themselves as victims, and I became the storm. But storms don't just destroy. Sometimes, they clear the sky. I started sleeping better. I even laughed again quietly, when I realized no one had asked me for money in 3 weeks. Then, one Monday morning, I got a call from an unknown number. A polite male voice said, "Mr. Carter, this is Harbor West Lending. We're following up on your mortgage application." I froze. "What application?" "The one you and a Mr. Brandon Carter co-signed." My hands went cold around the phone. In that moment, I knew the fog was gone. The line had been crossed, and the quiet man they thought would never fight back was finally done being quiet. The call from Harbor West replayed in my head for days. I couldn't focus at work. Numbers blurred into meaningless strings, the screen pulsing with white light until it hurt to look. I kept hearing that voice. "You and Mr. Brandon Carter co-signed." That night, I opened my laptop again, logged into every financial account I owned. No new charges. No pending applications. Nothing. But the idea of what could have happened clung to me like static. By morning, I'd scheduled an appointment with a lawyer. Her name was Sloane Park, a recommendation from an old colleague who said, "She's the kind of attorney who doesn't blink when people lie to her." When I walked into her office, she was already reviewing my email. "So," she said, glancing up, "your brother forged a loan in your name. That's your theory?" "My theory," I said quietly, "is that he doesn't see the difference between borrowing and stealing." Sloane tapped her pen. "I'll need every document you have. Proof of payments, messages, anything showing a financial relationship. And Evan," she leaned forward, "if we do this, we do it loud." That word echoed in my mind long after I left her office. Loud. I'd spent my entire life whispering so my family wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Maybe it was time to let them hear me. That weekend, I called Maya. She sounded nervous but determined. "I went to Aunt Elaine's yesterday," she whispered. "Brandon was there. They were arguing in the kitchen." I hit record on my phone. My pulse jumped. "What did you get?" "You'll hear for yourself." When the file arrived, I sat on my couch in the dark, earbuds in. The recording was fuzzy but clear enough. Elaine's voice first sharp, impatient. "He'll sign if you pressure him, right? He owes us after all we've done." Brandon laughed. "I don't even need him to sign. I can just scan his signature from that old insurance form. Easy." A loud tick-tock followed the grandfather clock in their hallway. That sound steady, indifferent felt like a countdown. The next day, I froze my credit completely. I reported potential identity theft to the police and to Harbor West. The woman on the line hesitated when I explained. "Your brother?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said. "That's the part everyone stumbles on." Within a week, Sloane sent the cease and desist to both Brandon and my parents. No reply. But silence is never empty. It's the sound before the storm. Then the messages started. First, Mom. "Evan, we need to talk. You're overreacting." Then Dad, "This can't be how you treat family." And finally Brandon, late one night. "Bro, calm down. It was just paperwork. You know I'd never screw you over." I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. He'd already done it. 2 days later, Maya called again. "Evan, they're saying you're losing it. Aunt Elaine told Pastor Collins you're in therapy for paranoia." I laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds like it might break into a scream. Maybe I should send him the loan application with my forged signature. Maya hesitated. "They think if they discredit you first, no one will believe your side. Then I'll make it impossible to ignore." I began collecting everything. Every payment confirmation, every text where Mom said thank you for helping with the mortgage, every Venmo note that said, "groceries or utilities." At night, my apartment floor was covered in paper, years of invisible labor laid bare. It looked like evidence from a crime scene. And in a way, it was. Still, I needed more than proof. I needed motive, pattern, history. That's when I remembered the old cabin box, the letter, the utility bill from years ago. It wasn't just sentiment, it was precedent. Elaine had used my name once before. I scanned it, labeled it Exhibit A, pattern of identity misuse. Sloane called the next morning. "Good news," she said. "The bank confirmed your name was added using an unverified email. They flagged it for fraud. You're in the clear." "And the rest of them?" "That depends on how far you want this to go." I hesitated. "All the way." She chuckled. "Good. Because they're about to learn what happens when you underestimate the quiet one." By the end of January, I'd stopped feeling guilt. I'd stopped checking my phone, too. But one text slipped through late at night. It was from Danica, the ex. "Hey, you don't know me, but you should see this." Attached were screenshots of Brandon's email thread with an investor. He'd promised collateral for a family business, using my house as proof of stability. That was the final crack in the foundation. I forwarded it to Sloane, who replied within minutes. "That's attempted wire fraud. We're escalating." The next morning, my phone rang again, Harbor West confirming the fraudulent application had been withdrawn. Brandon must have panicked. But in pulling back, he'd left a paper trail I could drive a truck through. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Still, I knew the quiet wouldn't last. People like my mother and brother didn't vanish when cornered, they doubled down. And I could feel it coming, like the air before a thunderstorm, thick and electric. The thunder came exactly a week later. I was at work, halfway through a budget forecast, when my phone lit up with an unknown number from my hometown. For a split second, I thought it might be the bank again. I answered, "Mr. Carter? This is Deputy Hall from Willow County." The words made my pulse slow. "Yes? Your mother filed a harassment report against you. Says you've been threatening the family financially." I almost laughed. "Threatening? I haven't spoken to them in months." "I figured," he said, voice low, almost apologetic. "She's been emotional, but I have to document that I called." When we hung up, I sat there staring at the cubicle wall. They're trying to rewrite the story again. That night, I forwarded the call log to Sloan. She sighed through the phone. "Classic deflection. We'll counter with documentation." "I've got plenty," I said, "but I think they're unraveling." "Good," she replied. "People reveal their true selves under pressure." The following Sunday, Maya called, her voice shaky. "They're saying you hacked into their accounts." Anna Lane showed everyone screenshots of a login attempt and said it was you. I rubbed my eyes. "Maya, please tell me you didn't believe that." "Of course not. The timestamps are from 3 a.m. while you were in Seattle." "I'm not in Seattle yet." "I mean, you will be soon," she said. "But they don't care about facts. They're building sympathy." That night, I opened Facebook for the first time in months. Elaine had posted a photo of Brandon standing by the fireplace, the same one I repaired years ago. The caption read, "Family stands together through lies and betrayal." Hundreds of likes. Comments saying, "Stay strong." One from Dad, "Truth always wins." It should have hurt, but instead, I felt something colder clarity. They weren't my family anymore. They were a brand, a PR campaign built on my silence. The next morning, I called the county records office. I wanted to confirm the mortgage status, just for my own closure. The clerk's tone was polite, but her words sliced through me. "Yes, Mr. Carter, that property is currently delinquent. For months behind." "4 months?" I repeated. "Yes. Foreclosure proceedings are scheduled to begin in 60 days. I thanked her and hung up slowly. My reflection stared back from the dark computer screen. That house, the shrine they worshipped, was about to slip through their fingers. And then, the thought, unless someone else bought it first. That was the pivot. The moment revenge stopped being an idea and became a plan. I called Sloan. If I wanted to purchase a foreclosed property through a third party, hypothetically, what's the cleanest way? She was silent for a moment. "You're not asking hypothetically, are you?" "No. Then you'll need an LLC. Something detached from your name. I can set it up this week. Call it Pine Dock Holdings," I said. "After my grandfather's cabin." Her smile was audible. "Poetic. I like it." Over the next few weeks, the steps unfolded with eerie precision. Sloan drafted paperwork. I reached out to a realtor friend in Portland, someone I trusted to bid anonymously. We watched the public notices quietly tick forward. Meanwhile, the Carters kept playing their game. Elaine emailed, "You're being childish. If you ever loved this family, you'll fix what you broke." Brandon texted, "Bro, be real. You don't even need that house. Let me handle this." I didn't respond. Every word they sent was another nail in the coffin they were building for themselves. But the most surreal moment came one night in February when I stopped by a diner near work. I was paying my check when a voice behind me said, "You're Evan Carter, right?" I turned. A woman in a gray coat smiled. "I'm from Harbor West. Off the record, I thought you'd like to know the fraud case against your brother was officially logged." "Logged?" "Yes. Your lawyer must have been thorough. You'll get the paperwork soon." She lowered her voice. "He's in over his head. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I thanked her and left with my heart pounding, not from fear, but adrenaline. That night, I went home and stood by the window for a long time, watching the streetlights flicker against the snow. My reflection looked different, straighter, calmer. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was directing. I began rehearsing the confrontation that would never happen. Imagining walking into their kitchen, placing the notarized proof on the table, and saying nothing, just letting silence do the talking. But I didn't need to. The system was doing it for me. Sloan called again. Foreclosure confirmed. Auction date set. I took a breath. "Then it's time." She paused. "Evan, when this is over, what do you want?" I looked at the stack of papers on my table, receipts, emails, all the invisible proof of a lifetime spent being useful. "I just want peace." I said. And if they beg? They won't, I said quietly. And even if they did, I wouldn't recognize their voices anymore. The snow kept falling outside, soft and relentless. Inside, the silence felt different now, less like punishment, more like power. The quiet one was finally being heard. The courthouse smelled like old wood and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed above the narrow rows of chairs, their hum louder than the dozen people scattered across the room. I sat in the back, one hand gripping a folder that held everything: documents, receipts, the timeline Sloan built like a blueprint of my life. She stood near the front, composed as always, black suit immaculate. My name wasn't on any public list. Pine Dock Holdings LLC was the bidder. Just another quiet investor. That was the point. The auctioneer shuffled papers, voice flat. Item 12. Property located at 347 Willow Bend Road. 3-bedroom, 2-bath residence. Starting bid, $242,000. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The image of that house flickered in my head. Mom's lace curtains, Dad's recliner. The kitchen where I learned that love could sound like criticism. Do I hear 242? The man called. A woman in a red blazer raised her hand. 245. Sloane's agent lifted her paddle calmly. 248. Another bidder joined, probably a flipper. They went back and forth, numbers echoing off the tiled floor. 250. 252. 255. My heartbeat synced with each call. 260. The flipper said. Sloane's agent didn't hesitate. 262. The room went quiet. The flipper hesitated, sighed, lowered his hand. 262 going once. Twice. Sold to Pine Dock Holdings LLC. The gavel cracked down like a thunderclap. And just like that, it was mine. Not out of nostalgia. Not for revenge. For closure. Sloane turned to me, whispering, "It's done." I nodded, still staring at the floor as the sound of the gavel echoed in my chest. We filed the paperwork. The property transfer took 9 days, 9 long days, where I checked my email every morning like a ritual. On the 10th day, Sloane called. Deed recorded. It's official. The same morning, a formal notice to vacate was delivered to the Carter residence. Legal, polite, airtight. The letter offered relocation assistance, a small stipend, conditional on the property being left intact. By that evening, my phone lit up with unknown numbers. I didn't answer. The next day, it happened. I was walking out of a downtown bakery, holding a coffee I didn't even taste, when I saw them across the street. Elaine, Richard, Brandon. They stood outside the local bank, bundled in coats, faces pale and drawn. Brandon was on his phone, pacing. Richard rubbed his temples, avoiding eye contact. Mom's eyes locked on mine, first sharp, wide, disbelief freezing her mid-step. For a second, we just stared. She took one step forward. Evan? I didn't answer. Brandon turned, spotted me, his face flushing red. You think this is funny? I crossed the street slowly, each step deliberate. No, I said quietly. I think it's overdue. Elaine's voice trembled. You can't do this to us. We're your family. I tilted my head. You taught me family isn't about blood. It's about use. She blinked fast, as if she didn't understand English. Brandon stepped forward, trying to sound composed. You stole our house. No, I said. I bought it. Legally. You had every chance to keep it. His jaw clenched. We were struggling. I looked him dead in the eye. And you called me a burden. He flinched. For once, the arrogance slipped. Mom started crying, not the soft kind, but the theatrical sobs that draw attention. People passing by slowed, watching. Don't make a scene, Richard muttered, but she ignored him. Brandon jabbed a finger toward me. You always wanted to be the victim. Congrats. Now you're the villain. I smiled cold. Steady. Villains usually win. Then I turned and walked away, leaving their voices fading behind me like a dying radio signal. That night, Sloane sent me photos from the property manager. The vacate notice had been taped back on the door, ripped in half. The porch light still glowed. Under it, someone, Brandon, probably had carved one word into the wood frame. Traitor. 2 days later, the manager called. Mr. Carter? There's damage. Broken cabinet doors. Holes in the drywall. Smashed built-ins. Document everything, I said. They just voided their relocation payment. He chuckled darkly. Got it. By the time the sheriff delivered the final order, they were gone. I went there a week later. Not to gloat, just to see. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The front yard was littered with dead leaves. I stepped inside, the floorboards creaking under my shoes. The living room smelled of dust and lemon cleaner. The walls were stripped bare, except for one nail still holding a crooked photo frame. Inside was an old Christmas picture, Brandon front and center, Mom's hand on his shoulder, Dad smiling faintly. I was half out of frame, face blurred. I stared at it for a long time, then set it on the counter. In the master bedroom closet, I found a dusty shoebox labeled Evan. Inside were childhood drawings, faded report cards, and a note in my own handwriting from 3rd grade. Thanks for the peanut butter sandwich. Mom. She'd kept it. Or maybe she just forgot it was there. Either way, it didn't belong to me anymore. I closed the box, left it on the shelf, and walked out. Outside, the air was cold and clean. For the first time in my life, that house didn't own a piece of me. As I locked the door behind me, my phone buzzed. A new text, unknown number. Why are you doing this to us? I stared at the message for a long time, then typed slowly. No, you did this to yourselves. This is me finally listening. Then I turned off my phone. When I looked back at the house one last time, the porch light flickered on, off, on before settling into darkness. It felt like the house was finally exhaling. The weeks that followed felt unreal. Silence, once a punishment, became a reward. No phone calls, no guilt, just space. Sloan handled everything. She filed the final reports, forwarded me the case updates, and eventually called one afternoon with the kind of calm that only comes when the battle's over. Brandon accepted a plea deal, she said. Attempted identity theft, falsified financial documents, and a suspended sentence with probation. It's official. I exhaled slowly. So he won't serve time. No, but his career's over. Any company that runs a background check will see it. I didn't smile. I just said, that's enough. Because it was. Maya called later that week. You won, she whispered, like she was afraid someone might overhear. No, I said, looking out at the rain, streaking down my apartment window. I stopped losing. She hesitated. Anna Lane's been telling people you tricked them, that you bought the house in secret. I did, I said, but not in secret. In silence. Maya laughed softly. I recorded her again. By the way, when she realized the house was gone, she said, Evan owed us. He wouldn't even have a life if it weren't for us. I thought you'd want that. I did. Not to use against her, just to remind myself why I left. 2 months later, the renovation was done. New floors, fresh paint, walls stripped of their ghosts. But I didn't move in. I donated it instead to a nonprofit that helps young adults aging out of foster care. We renamed it Harlan House, after my grandfather, the only one who ever saw me for who I was. On opening day, I visited quietly. The air smelled of new wood and rain. Laughter floated from the kitchen where volunteers unpacked boxes. A girl, maybe 19, approached me shyly. Mr. Carter? She asked. You really bought this place for us? Not exactly, I said. I just made sure the right people got it. She bit her lip, eyes wide. Are you sure we deserve it? I smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need to prove anything. You don't have to deserve a home, I said. A home should deserve you. As I walked out, the porch light flicked on warm, steady, golden. And for the first time, I didn't look back with anger. I looked back with peace. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, like your voice didn't matter until you finally walked away, this story is for you. Because sometimes, the real revenge isn't loud or cruel. It's quiet. It's building a life they can no longer reach. Evan Carter didn't destroy his family. He simply stopped letting them destroy him. And if you've ever been there, you already know, peace is the sweetest kind of justice. So tell me, what would you have done if you were in Evan's place? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.